It looks like the Formula One world is a place that just keeps giving us surprises. There's a new rumor that Aramco, one of the biggest money companies in the sport, and Aston Martin's main partner, wants to buy the whole Silverstone racing team. They've promised to try to get two of the most famous F1 people, Max Verstappen and Adrian Newey. But if this actually happens, what will happen to the people who work at Red Bull right now? And more importantly, is this the start of Red Bull's team falling apart? After Toto Wolff's latest comment about Christian Horner staying in charge, Aramco, the company that sponsors Aston Martin right now, wants to buy the whole team, or at least most of it, from Lawrence Stroll. They want to be more involved in the sport. There's been a lot of interest in this sport from Middle Eastern countries, especially because they've put a lot of money into most of the teams. But Aramco doesn't mess around. They want to bring in Max Verstappen and Adrian Newey right away and make a championship-winning team from the very first day. The report says that this Saudi Arabian oil company is ready to give both Newey and Verstappen a blank check, meaning unlimited money, to get them to sign with their team. This is something Ferrari was also ready to do, but they might get beaten by these newcomers to the sport. Before you start talking about the budget cap rules, let us remind you that the top 3 highest-paid people on each team don't count toward this money rule. So that doesn't stop Aramco from giving hundreds of millions of dollars to both Newey and Verstappen to get them to join their team. The big question is, what needs to happen for us to actually see this become real? First, Aramco needs to complete buying the team, which they've been trying to do for the past few months. And Lawrence Stroll's recent actions point exactly toward this happening. The Canadian billionaire sold a small part of his team to an American company called Arcturus Partners back in November. He might be open to selling the entire team, or at least most of it, to their current partners, Aramco. The oil company has reportedly been very busy trying to convince Lawrence Stroll to make this happen during the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, since it was the perfect place to talk to some very important people. It's worth mentioning that Aramco has a very big influence in the sport, because they've been a strongly committed partner to Formula One since 2020. That was one of the most important seasons for the sport because of the worldwide pandemic. When reporting about this story, Formula Uno, the news source that shocked the F1 world first with this news, wrote that Aramco looked at whether they could make certain moves and gave blank checks for future deals. In this situation, Red Bull's most important people are their targets. This includes the 3-time world champion Max Verstappen and the engineering genius Adrian Newey. The fact that these two are seen as possible targets shows how much has changed in recent months. Formula One's budget cap doesn't include the salaries of the 3 most senior people in the team, and of course the drivers as well. Unfortunately for Red Bull, they can't stop the problems in their team. Even though the important people, Helmut Marko, Christian Horner, and Jos Verstappen, sat at one table and agreed to stop fighting so they could focus on what's most important, winning races. However, the Verstappen family still feels the same way. As long as Horner stays as the leader of the team, there will be trouble. And where there's trouble, there's a huge chance for superstars to leave and prove to everyone that they can do much better in other places too, even though they might not really need to do that right now. What we must not forget is that 2026 is coming up soon, and most people believe that besides Ferrari and Mercedes, the partnership between Aston Martin and Honda is also ready to make a lot of trouble for the rest of the F1 teams. Honda isn't new to building engines in this sport. Quite the opposite. They're considered pioneers and a very experienced manufacturer that could give a middle-of-the-pack team some championship-winning experience. If you add the fact that Verstappen has a lot of trust in Honda and how reliable their engines are, something that has gotten much better in the past couple of years, it's safe to think that he would consider this a very important factor for his future in Formula One. Even though he said there's no reason for him to leave Red Bull right now, Max pointed to Lewis Hamilton's move to Ferrari and said that you can never say never to a certain move in his career. And after these rumors, now we can understand why Red Bull wants to stop fighting and end the civil war for a while. According to Formula Uno, the Honda factor will have a huge influence on Max's decision. The website went on to write that Honda's move to Aston Martin gives the Silverstone-based team the support of a manufacturer, a very important ingredient for winning in F1. From Max Verstappen's team's perspective, having Honda can only be positive. On the other hand, Red Bull is entering the sport as rookies on paper, since it would be their first fully independent season with their powertrain division that will have Ford's name on it. Of course, this is also a new era that could go one way or another. But considering the experience that Honda has in the sport, we might be looking at a team that's more likely to be competitive from 2026 onwards. However, we do know that if Verstappen decides to leave the team, whether that's with Marco or with Newey, we can never rule out the opportunity he'll have at Mercedes. Yes, the Silver Arrows are currently struggling with their car's design and philosophy, and the fact that Hamilton left them for Ferrari could push Verstappen to think in another direction. But given the engine advantage Mercedes has over the rest of the teams, you can never say no to this move. Obviously, Toto Wolff has been making efforts to try to sign both Marco and Verstappen, jokingly saying that the doors for the 88-year-old are wide open and he can be the next Niki Lauda without the red hat, but that has been quickly denied by Marco. Now it's clear that they will think about this decision again because of all the latest developments at Red Bull. And when talking about the 2025 seat at both Mercedes and Red Bull, Wolff went on to say, "If Christian Horner remains in command at Red Bull, anything is possible." But Wolff has also realized the situation his team is currently in. They're struggling to build a solid platform and bring upgrades to their car. The last thing that would attract Verstappen is a team that has failed to be competitive for 3 seasons in a row after being dominant for 8 straight years in the turbo-hybrid era. Even so, Wolff himself said that it's up to Mercedes to prove that they have the best car on the grid, or can have the best car on the grid from 2026 onwards, in order to attract Verstappen and as many high-profile staff as possible. However, what needs to be pointed out is that Verstappen will have to fight George Russell. Although Russell said he'd be more than open to having the Dutchman as his teammate, given the fact that he drove with the 7-time world champion for 2 years, he will definitely face a much bigger challenge once the 3-time world champion steps foot in Mercedes. And this could be a scenario that Max would want to avoid, even though he's definitely not afraid of some internal competition and taking over a role from another driver. What's far more important is the future of both teams Max is looking at as his potential next destination. Even though Aston Martin is struggling right now, they do have a solid platform to build on. They're becoming more and more independent from Mercedes, with 2026 expected to be a fully independent season for the Silverstone-based team. On the other hand, while the glory and greatness of Mercedes are not to be messed with, the Silver Arrows are in huge danger of falling back in the running order and being a less attractive option for drivers of Max's level. And that itself goes to show that we might be looking at the current 3-time world champion in a green suit sooner rather than later. Of course, as of now, things remain the same. Verstappen is still a driver for Red Bull, along with Newey being the chief technical officer of the Austrian team. But the most important thing is that the future might not be that bright for this team after all the internal drama, as well as the reports that Horner is pushing toward a higher role at Red Bull despite the ongoing issues with the team. This goes to show that as a driver and employee, if you cannot solve the problems in the team, then you would be much better off in another place. Now, without Verstappen and Newey, the Austrian team is losing a huge amount of value, both in experience and marketing. It would be a huge challenge for them to overcome the problems that would come their way. It doesn't help that Chalerm Uvidya sent a family member as a spy in order to watch Horner's behavior. This further shows that even the owner of 51% of the team might not have full trust in the actions of the 50-year-old Brit. With all this in mind, do you think that Verstappen and Newey would go to Aston Martin? And more importantly, do you think that this has the potential to bring Red Bull back to the chasing role, instead of them being the team everyone else is chasing on the grid? Let us know in the comments below.